Veltar's 4 eyes focused on the scanner display for the third time in 10 minutes. The numbers didn't change. They couldn't change. Yet there they were, glowing softly against the dark screen of his workstation. Impossible, he whispered in his native tongue, his thin fingers dancing across the control panel. The Galactic Monitoring Station Epsilon 7 had been his home for the past 8 years. He knew every reading, every normal pattern, every expected signal that should appear on these screens. This was not one of them. The station hung in the void between star systems, a massive ring of metal and crystal that tracked every registered vessel in the outer rim sectors. Veltar was one of 30 scanner technicians who worked around the clock, watching for pirates, smugglers, or any ship that might be where it shouldn't be. It was boring work most of the time. Ships followed predictable routes. They went where they were supposed to go, except for this one. Veltar pulled up the sector map on his secondary screen. Sector 47 Alpha appeared as a red zone, marked with warning symbols that made his stomach twist. 3 years ago, that sector had been home to 17 human colonies. Now it was empty space, officially listed as a dead zone. Nothing lived there anymore. Nothing could live there after what the Cathari military had done. The Human Coalition War had ended with humanity's complete destruction. Every human ship had been tracked and destroyed. Every human world had been sterilized. The Cathari Confederation had made sure of that. They had to. Humans were too dangerous to leave alive. Yet his scanner showed a ship moving through that dead sector. A ship with an energy signature that matched human technology. Veltar's hands shook as he ran another scan. The computer took 30 seconds to process the data. When the results appeared, they were exactly the same. Ship classification, human dreadnought class. Speed, impossibly fast. Course, heading directly toward Cathari core worlds. This can't be right, he said to himself. He had seen the final reports from the war. Every human vessel had been accounted for. The last human stronghold at Terra Prime had been reduced to space dust. There were no survivors. There couldn't be survivors. Veltar reached for his communication device with a trembling hand. Protocol demanded that any unusual readings be reported immediately to the station commander. But this wasn't just unusual. This was impossible. Commander Zexhi's office was 3 levels up from the scanner deck. The commander was a typical Cathari officer. Tall, proud, and absolutely certain that the Confederation's military had eliminated every possible threat to galactic peace. When Veltar's message appeared on his personal screen, Zexhi's first reaction was annoyance. Technician Veltar reports unusual readings in Sector 47 Alpha. He read aloud to his empty office. Requests immediate verification. Zexhi stood up from his desk and walked to the large window that looked out into space. The stars were peaceful tonight, just as they had been every night since the war ended. The humans were gone. The galaxy was safe. There couldn't be any unusual readings in a dead sector, but protocol was protocol. Zexhi activated his communication system and contacted the scanner deck directly. Veltar, this is Commander Zexhi. Explain your report. Veltar's voice came through the speaker, tight with nervousness. Sir, I'm detecting a ship in Sector 47 Alpha. The computer identifies it as human technology, but that's impossible. I've run the scan 3 times and— Stop! Zexhi's voice was sharp. You're telling me there's a human ship in a sterilized sector? Yes, sir. I mean, that's what the scanner says, but I know it can't be right. Maybe it's a malfunction, or maybe someone is using stolen human technology to— What's the ship's classification and speed? There was a pause before Veltar answered. Dreadnought class, sir. Moving at— Sir, the speed reading doesn't make sense. It's faster than any human ship should be able to travel. Zexhi felt a cold sensation in his chest. During the war, human dreadnoughts had been their most dangerous ships. Powerful, well-armed, and commanded by humans who seemed to have no fear of death. But even human dreadnoughts had limits. They couldn't move faster than the laws of physics allowed. I want a full verification, Zexhi ordered. Run every test we have. Check the scanner calibration. Cross-reference the signature with our military database. I want to know exactly what's out there. Yes, sir. Should I alert the military command? Not yet. First, we make sure this isn't a mistake. But as Zexhi ended the communication, he was already reaching for his emergency contact list. If there really was a human ship out there, the military needed to know immediately. 2 hours later, Veltar had run every test he could think of. The scanner calibration was perfect. The ship's energy signature matched the military database exactly. According to every system on the station, there was definitely a human dreadnought moving through Sector 47 Alpha. More disturbing was the ship's course. It wasn't wandering aimlessly through space. It was heading in a straight line toward the inner systems, where billions of Cathari citizens lived and worked. At its current speed, it would reach the edge of Confederation space in less than 2 days. Veltar called up the ship identification database and ran the signature through the system. What he found made his blood freeze. The computer matched the energy signature to a specific vessel, the UES Defiance. According to the records, the Defiance had been humanity's flagship during the final battle at Terra Prime. It had been personally destroyed by Admiral Corvin himself, the hero of the Human Coalition War. Veltar stared at the screen in disbelief. The Defiance was supposed to be space dust, scattered across the Terra Prime system. Its destruction had been recorded by dozens of Cathari ships. There were even video records of the explosion that tore the massive human vessel apart. Yet here it was, whole and moving faster than any human ship had ever moved before. Commander Zexhai arrived on the scanner deck with 2 military officers in tow. The 3 Cathari gathered around Veltar's workstation, their faces growing more serious as they studied the readings. "You're certain this is accurate?" asked one of the officers. Veltar nodded. "I've checked everything twice, sir. The ship is there, and it's definitely human." "Show me the identification," Zexhai ordered. When the UES Defiance appeared on the screen, the military officers exchanged worried glances. Both of them had fought in the war. Both of them knew what that ship was supposed to represent: the end of human resistance. "Contact Admiral Corvin immediately," the senior officer said. "If the Defiance somehow survived, he needs to know. He's the only one who's actually fought against that ship." As the emergency communications began, Veltar continued to watch his scanner. The mysterious ship maintained its impossible speed, heading straight for the heart of Cathari space. Whatever was aboard that vessel, it had been hiding in the dead zones for 3 years. Now it was coming home. The thought sent chills through every Cathari on the station. During the war, humans had been known for their refusal to surrender, their crazy tactics, and their ability to keep fighting even when victory was impossible. If some humans had somehow survived, if they had spent 3 years planning and preparing, Veltar shook his head and tried to focus on his instruments. The scanner continued its steady beeping, tracking the ship that shouldn't exist as it moved through space that should have been empty forever. In the depths of space, the UES Defiance continued its journey toward a confrontation that would change everything. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars stream past the main viewing screen. Her hands rested on the command console, fingers that looked perfectly human but felt different somehow. Everything felt different now. "Navigation report," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge with the same authority it had held 3 years ago. "Some things never changed, even when everything else did." "On course for the Cathari core systems, Captain," replied Lieutenant Torres from his station. "We'll reach the outer sensor networks in 18 hours. Sarah nodded and walked to the center of the bridge. Around her, 47 crew members worked at their stations with perfect efficiency. They looked human. They acted human, but Sarah knew the truth about what they had become. "Maintain current speed," she ordered. "I want the Cathari to see us coming." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Sarah could feel her crew's thoughts not as words but as emotions and intentions. It was one of the changes they had all experienced since the upload. They were still individuals, but they were also something more. Sarah closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to the last days of Earth. The memories were crystal clear, preserved perfectly in her quantum consciousness. She could remember every detail of those final, desperate hours. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves had been working on Project Lazarus for 2 years when the Cathari delivered their final ultimatum: surrender unconditionally or watch every human world burn. The project was humanity's last desperate attempt to survive beyond physical death. Upload human consciousness into quantum-enhanced artificial bodies that could survive in space indefinitely. It's not ready. Dr. Reeves had told the Emergency Council. "We need more time to test the stability of the consciousness transfer. The early subjects show signs of degradation after a few weeks." "We don't have more time," Sarah had replied. She was Admiral Chen then, commanding the last human fleet. The Cathari attack begins in 6 hours. Either we try this now or we die with our bodies. The council had voted unanimously. Better to risk an uncertain digital existence than face certain extinction. Sarah opened her eyes and returned to the present. The quantum upload had worked, but not in the way Dr. Reeves had expected. Instead of degrading over time, their consciousness had evolved. Each time one of them died, their quantum signature automatically regenerated from the stored template. But with all the memories and experiences of their previous iteration intact, Sarah was the 300th version of herself. She had died 299 times over the past 3 years, and each time she had returned slightly different, slightly better. The crew called it resurrection, but Sarah knew it was really evolution. Captain, called Ensign Park from the communications station. We're receiving a transmission from the monitoring station. They're trying to identify us, Sarah smiled. Let them try. Open a channel to Commander Singh. A moment later, the image of Commander Rajesh Singh appeared on the bridge's secondary screen. Like Sarah, he looked exactly as he had on the day of the upload. Unlike Sarah, he was currently aboard one of the 3 other human ships that had survived the war. Sarah, we're in position, Singh reported. The mining stations in Sector 12 are completely automated, just as our intelligence suggested. We can collect their databases without encountering any live resistance. Good. Remember, we're not here to fight if we can avoid it. We need information, not revenge. Singh's expression grew serious. Some of my crew are having trouble with that, Sarah. After what the Cathari did to us to Earth. I know, Sarah said quietly. I feel it too. But revenge won't bring back the dead or rebuild our worlds. Justice will. Understood, Captain. Sing out. As the communication ended, Sarah reflected on the changes that had occurred not just in her own consciousness but in all of them. The upload process had done more than preserve their minds. It had enhanced them. Their reaction times were now measured in microseconds instead of milliseconds. They could process vast amounts of information simultaneously. Most importantly, they could share thoughts and memories directly with each other when needed. But the greatest change was in their purpose. The Sarah Chen, who had commanded human fleets during the war, had been focused on survival and victory. This version of Sarah Chen was focused on something much larger. Justice for every species the Cathari had destroyed. Captain, Lieutenant Torres called out. We're approaching the first Cathari patrol route. 3 destroyer-class ships are moving to intercept us. Sarah moved to the tactical display and studied the approaching ships. During the war, 3 Cathari destroyers would have been a serious threat to any human vessel. Now they were simply an obstacle to be overcome. Time to intercept? 14 minutes at their current speed. Very well. All stations prepare for engagement. Remember, we disable and board. We do not destroy unless absolutely necessary. The crew responded with perfect coordination. Weapon systems came online. Shields powered up. The ship's quantum processors began calculating thousands of possible combat scenarios simultaneously. But Sarah's mind was focused on something else entirely. In the ship's secure database were the consciousness templates of every human who had ever lived. Not just the 847 who had been successfully uploaded, but digital copies of nearly 12 billion human minds recovered from Earth's databases before the planet's destruction. The Cathari thought they had destroyed humanity. They had only forced it to evolve. Incoming transmission from the lead destroyer, Ensign Park announced. They're demanding our identification and ordering us to stop. No response, Sarah ordered. Let them wonder. On the tactical display, the 3 Cathari ships had spread into an attack formation. Sarah could see their weapon systems charging, their shields reaching maximum power. The Cathari commanders were preparing for a fight against an enemy they thought they understood. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain, the destroyers are powering weapons, reported Chief Martinez from the tactical station. They'll be in firing range in 3 minutes. Sarah nodded and moved to her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the silent efficiency that came from shared consciousness. Each of them knew exactly what the others were thinking and planning. Helm, prepare evasive maneuvers. Tactical, target their engine systems only. I want them disabled, not destroyed. The first shots from the Cathari destroyers lit up the darkness of space. Bright energy beams that would have been deadly to any normal human ship struck the Defiance's shields and scattered harmlessly. Return fire, Sarah ordered calmly. The Defiance's weapon systems responded with inhuman precision. Beams of coherent energy struck each destroyer in exactly the right places to disable their engines, without causing catastrophic damage. Within 30 seconds, all 3 Cathari ships were drifting helplessly in space. "Prepare boarding parties," Sarah announced. "We need their navigation computers and communication logs." As her crew prepared to board the disabled ships, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The engagement had gone exactly as planned. The Cathari crews were alive and unharmed, but their ships' databases would soon belong to humanity. Each piece of information they gathered brought them closer to their ultimate goal, finding the location of the Cathari homeworld and exposing the truth about what had really caused the human coalition war. The Cathari had started the war by claiming humans were too aggressive and dangerous to be allowed to survive. But Sarah and her crew had discovered the real reason in the final days of Earth. The Cathari weren't trying to eliminate humanity because they were dangerous. They were trying to eliminate humanity because they were the next species on the Cathari harvest list. Admiral Corvin stood in the war room of the Cathari flagship Eternal Victory, staring at the holographic display that showed the outer rim sectors. Red warning lights blinked across multiple star systems, marking the locations where human ships had been detected. The reports were coming in faster than his staff could process them. "How many ships?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "At least 4 confirmed sightings, Admiral. The UES Defiance in Sector 47 Alpha, as reported by monitoring station Epsilon 7. 2 smaller vessels in the mining sectors, and another large ship that hit our research facility at Kepler Station." Corvin's claws clicked against the metal surface of the display table. Each click echoed through the silent war room like a countdown timer. The other officers stood perfectly still, waiting for their admiral to speak. They all knew what the human presence meant. They all remembered the war. "What about casualties?" Corvin asked finally. "None, sir. That's what makes this so strange. The humans disable our ships and board them, but they don't harm the crews. They just take computer data and leave." This puzzled Corvin more than anything else. During the war, humans had fought with a desperate fury that bordered on madness. They had never shown mercy to Cathari forces. They had never taken prisoners or tried to minimize casualties. Yet now, when they had every reason to seek revenge, they were being careful. What kind of data are they taking? Navigation databases, communication logs, anything that contains information about Cathari ship movements and fleet positions. They seemed to be looking for something specific. Corvin turned away from the display and walked to the large window that showed the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the ship he thought he had destroyed 3 years ago was moving through space like a ghost from the past. The UES Defiance had been humanity's most powerful warship, commanded by their most dangerous officer. Corvin had personally overseen its destruction during the final battle at Terra Prime. He could still remember watching the massive human ship explode in a ball of superheated plasma. The blast had been visible from 3 star systems away. There had been no survivors. There couldn't have been survivors, yet the scanner readings were unmistakable. The energy signature matched exactly. Even the ship's quantum resonance frequency was identical to the original Defiance. Either the humans had built a perfect replica, or the impossible had happened. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the High Command. They want a full report on the human situation." Corvin nodded grimly. The Cathari High Command had been following the reports with growing alarm. The idea that humans might have survived the war was terrifying enough. The fact that they seemed to have improved their technology made it even worse. "Tell the High Command that I'm taking the Purifier Squadron to intercept the humans. We'll handle this personally." The Purifier Squadron was the elite of the Cathari military, 12 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, crewed by the best officers and equipped with weapons that could crack planets. During the war, they had been Corvin's personal command, the force that had led the final assault on human space. "Admiral," his tactical officer spoke up hesitantly, "the humans are moving faster than our ships can match. By the time we reach their last known position, they'll be long gone." "Then we don't chase them," Corvin replied. "We predict where they're going." Corvin activated the strategic display and began plotting course vectors. The humans weren't moving randomly. They were following a pattern, hitting specific targets in a specific order. Each target they had struck was an isolated facility with minimal defenses but maximum data storage. They're not looking for military information, he realized aloud. They're looking for administrative data. Navigation routes, supply schedules, communication networks. His intelligence officer stepped forward. What would they want with that kind of information, sir? Corvin felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. There was only one reason the humans would need that type of data. They were trying to find something that the Cathari had kept hidden even from their own military. They're looking for the homeworld, he said quietly. The war room fell completely silent. Every officer in the room knew that the location of Kethval Prime was the most closely guarded secret in the Confederation. During the war, even the human intelligence services had never discovered its location. The safety of their entire civilization depended on keeping it hidden. Impossible, breathed the tactical officer. The homeworld's location is classified at the highest levels. Even most of our own ships don't know the exact coordinates. The humans only need to find someone who does know, Corvin pointed out, or they need to gather enough data to calculate the location themselves. Corvin studied the tactical display more carefully. If the humans continued their current pattern of attacks, they would eventually hit targets that contained fragments of the information they needed. Given enough data points, their computers could triangulate the position of any star system in the galaxy. How long before they have enough information? He asked his intelligence officer. The younger Cathari worked quickly at his console, running calculations based on the humans' current progress. When he looked up, his face was pale. If they maintained their current rate of data collection, they could have the homeworld's location within 6 days. 6 days. Corvin had to prevent the humans from reaching Kethval Prime, not just for military reasons, but for reasons that went far deeper than the war. There were secrets on the homeworld that could not be allowed to fall into human hands. Secrets that would destroy the Cathari Confederation from within if they became public knowledge. Set course for the Meridian Research Complex, Corvin ordered. If the humans are following the pattern I think they are, that's their next logical target, sir. The Meridian Complex is 3 days away at maximum speed. Then we'd better hope the humans take their time. As the Eternal Victory and its escort ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, Corvin continued to study the tactical display. The human attack showed a level of coordination and planning that impressed him, despite his hatred for their species. Each strike was perfectly timed and executed with minimal risk to human forces. But what disturbed him most was the humans' apparent knowledge of Cathari weaknesses. They knew exactly which systems to disable to stop a Cathari ship without destroying it. They knew which databases contained the most valuable information. They knew how to avoid Cathari patrol routes and sensor networks. It was as if they had been studying Cathari military procedures for years. Admiral, his communications officer announced, we're receiving reports of another human attack. This time it's the automated mining platform at Zerion 7. Corvin examined the new data and felt his suspicions confirmed. The mining platform's computers contained shipping schedules for the entire Outer Rim. With that information, the humans could predict the movement of every Cathari vessel in dozens of star systems. They're not just looking for the homeworld, he realized. They're mapping our entire military infrastructure. The implications were staggering. If the humans had detailed knowledge of Cathari ship movements, supply routes, and communication networks, they could strike anywhere in the galaxy with perfect timing. They could avoid Cathari forces entirely or ambush them at will. Sir, should I alert the other fleet commanders? Corvin considered the question carefully. Warning the other fleets might help them avoid human attacks, but it would also spread panic throughout the military. The last thing the Confederation needed was its own forces becoming paralyzed by fear of an enemy that was supposed to be extinct. No, he decided. We handle this ourselves. The humans want to play games with ghosts and shadows. Let's see how they handle the real thing. As the Purifier Squadron raced through hyperspace toward what Corvin hoped would be their next encounter with the humans, the Admiral continued to puzzle over one crucial question. How had the humans survived? The destruction of Terra Prime had been absolute. Every human ship, every human station, every human world had been systematically destroyed. The Cathari military had made certain that no human technology or human lives remained in the galaxy. Yet somehow, against all possibility, they had survived. Not only survived, but evolved into something even more dangerous than they had been during the war. Corvin stared out at the streaming stars and wondered if the Cathari Confederation had made a terrible mistake 3 years ago. Perhaps they should have found a way to coexist with humanity instead of trying to destroy them. But it was too late for such thoughts now. The humans were back, and they clearly wanted something more than simple survival. They wanted justice. The UES Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the HFY system. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, looking at the beautiful blue-green world that hung in space before them. HFY Prime, the secret homeworld of the HFY Confederation, was smaller than Earth had been, but no less lovely. "Take us into orbit," Sarah ordered. "Standard approach pattern. I want them to see us coming." Around HFY Prime, the orbital defense platforms were already powering up their weapons. Massive space stations that could destroy entire fleets were turning their guns toward the single human ship that had somehow found their most precious secret. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres reported from his station, "we're being scanned by at least 40 different targeting systems. The entire planetary defense grid is locked onto us." Sarah nodded calmly. She had expected this. The Kithari would be terrified that humans had found their homeworld. They would assume this was the beginning of a massive attack, a final act of revenge for the destruction of humanity. They were wrong. "Open all communication channels," Sarah commanded. "I want every Kithari in the system to hear this." Ensign Park worked at his console for a moment, then looked up. "All frequencies are open, Captain. You're broadcasting to the entire system." Sarah took a deep breath and began the speech she had been preparing for 3 years. "Citizens of the HFY Confederation, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. I know that our presence here frightens you. I know that you believed humanity was extinct. You were wrong on both counts." Throughout the HFY system, HFY citizens stopped what they were doing and listened to the impossible voice speaking in perfect HFY. On the homeworld surface, in orbital stations, aboard patrol ships, millions of beings heard the words they thought they would never hear again. "We are not here for revenge," Sarah continued. "We are not here to destroy your worlds as you destroyed ours. We are here because the galaxy deserves to know the truth about the HFY Confederation and the real reason for the Human Coalition War." On the main view screen, Sarah could see HFY ships moving to surround the Defiance. Admiral Corvin's Purifier Squadron had arrived just hours before, and now 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had their weapons trained on her vessel. "The truth," Sarah said, her voice carrying across space to reach every listener, "is that the HFY Confederation has been lying to the galaxy for centuries. The Human Coalition War was not started because humans were aggressive or dangerous. It was started because humanity was the next species on the HFY harvest list." The response was immediate. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication channels as HFY officials tried to jam Sarah's transmission. But the humans had spent 3 years studying HFY technology. Their signal was too strong and too widespread to be stopped. "For the past 500 years," Sarah continued, "the HFY have been systematically destroying intelligent species throughout the galaxy. They provoke conflicts, manipulate wars, and create disasters that lead to the extinction of entire civilizations. Then they harvest the quantum signatures of dying consciousness to power their advanced technology." Sarah paused to let the implications sink in. Across the HFY Confederation, member species that had lost colonies to unexplained disasters were beginning to understand what had really happened to their people. "Humanity discovered this truth in the final days of Earth," Sarah explained. "Our scientists found evidence of 17 previous species that had been harvested by the HFY. The Villani, who supposedly died in a plague, the Zorthak, who were said to have destroyed themselves in a civil war, the Rimtal, who vanished after their star mysteriously went nova. All of them were murdered by the HFY to feed their technology. The evidence began transmitting automatically from the Defiance's computers. 3 years of collected data from HFY databases, communications, and research facilities. Detailed records of how each species had been manipulated into extinction. Scientific reports on the quantum consciousness harvesting process. Even audio recordings of HFY officials planning the destruction of human worlds. On dozens of worlds throughout the Confederation, member species received the data and began to understand the horrible truth. Their allies, their protectors, their leaders had been murdering entire civilizations for centuries. "The technology that makes the HFY the dominant power in the galaxy," Sarah continued, "is powered by genocide. Every faster-than-light drive, every energy weapon, Every defensive shield runs on the quantum essence of extinct species. The Cathari are not the guardians of galactic peace. They are the galaxy's greatest monsters. Admiral Corvin's voice crackled over the emergency military channel. All ships, open fire! Destroy that vessel immediately. But Sarah had expected this as well. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Admiral. You see, this transmission isn't just going to the Cathari Confederation. We've been broadcasting to every major species in the galaxy for the past 6 hours. The Taldari Assembly knows. The Xerian Republic knows. The Independent Worlds Alliance knows. Destroying us now won't stop the truth from spreading. The weapons fire that Admiral Corvin had ordered never came. His captains hesitated, realizing that attacking the humans now would only confirm everything Sarah had said. But I'll give you a choice, Sarah offered. The Cathari people are not responsible for the crimes of their leaders. The common citizens didn't know about the harvesting program. They were victims too in their own way. Sarah gestured to Lieutenant Torres, who activated a new display on the bridge. It showed the locations of every Cathari official who had been involved in the genocide program. Names, faces, and detailed records of their crimes appeared on screens throughout the galaxy. These individuals, Sarah announced, are the ones responsible for the murder of 18 intelligent species. They planned the wars. They ordered the harvests. They built their civilization on the bones of the innocent. We demand that they be turned over to a tribunal of the surviving species for judgment. The list contained over 300 names, including most of the Cathari High Command and many planetary governors. But it also notably excluded millions of ordinary Cathari citizens who had simply been following orders or who had been kept in ignorance. If the Cathari Confederation agrees to this demand, Sarah continued, we will help you transition to sustainable technology that doesn't require the murder of innocents. Humanity has learned much in the past 3 years. We can share that knowledge with species that choose justice over genocide. Throughout the galaxy, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Member species of the Confederation began demanding answers from their Cathari representatives. Independent worlds started mobilizing their fleets. Even within Cathari space, lower-ranking officers and ordinary citizens began questioning their government's actions. But if the Cathari Confederation refuses, Sarah's voice grew cold, then humanity will ensure that justice is served. We have evolved beyond the limitations that allowed you to destroy us before. We cannot be killed permanently. We cannot be defeated by conventional weapons. And we will not stop until every species that has been murdered by the Cathari has been avenged. As if to demonstrate this point, Sarah transmitted the consciousness patterns of her crew to the entire galaxy, the technical specifications of their quantum upload technology, the methods for resurrection and consciousness enhancement, even the templates for building new bodies. She was giving every species in the galaxy the ability to achieve the same evolution that humanity had undergone. The choice is yours, Sarah concluded. Justice or war, accountability or extinction. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the Kethval system in stunned silence. On the surface of the home world, riots were already beginning as citizens demanded answers from their government. Throughout the galaxy, the Cathari Confederation was collapsing as member species withdrew their support and demanded justice for the victims of the Harvest Program. Admiral Corvin stared at the human ship on his tactical display, knowing that everything had changed forever. The Cathari could destroy the Defiance, but it wouldn't matter. The truth was already spreading throughout the galaxy like a virus, infecting every species with the knowledge of what the Cathari had done. For the first time in 500 years, the Cathari Confederation faced an enemy they could not defeat through force or manipulation. They faced the truth, and truth was more powerful than any weapon they possessed. Sarah Chen had kept her promise. Humanity had achieved justice for all the species that had been murdered by the Cathari. Now it remained to be seen whether the galaxy would choose forgiveness or revenge for centuries of hidden genocide. The age of Cathari dominance was over. The age of truth had begun. The battle for Kethval Prime began 3 hours after Sarah's transmission ended. Admiral Corvin, faced with the complete collapse of everything he had fought to protect, made the desperate decision that would seal his fate and the fate of his entire species. All ships, attack formation, he commanded over the military communication network. We destroy the human vessel, and then we silence every world that received their transmission. The 12 ships of the Purifier Squadron moved into attack position around the UES Defiance. These were the most advanced warships in the Cathari fleet, each one capable of destroying entire planets. Together, they represented enough firepower to sterilize a solar system. Captain Sarah Chen watched the enemy ships positioning themselves and felt a moment of sadness. This didn't have to happen. The Cathari could have chosen justice and accountability. Instead, they had chosen to fight. All crew, prepare for collective consciousness merger, she announced to her ship. We're about to show the galaxy what humanity has become. Throughout the Defiance, 847 enhanced human minds began the process that they had perfected over 3 years of evolution. Individual consciousness merged into something greater, a collective intelligence that could process thousands of calculations simultaneously while maintaining the creativity and intuition that made humans unique. Sarah felt her awareness expand as her mind linked with every other crew member. She was still herself, but she was also part of something vast and powerful. Through 847 pairs of enhanced eyes, she could see every angle of the approaching battle. Through 847 enhanced minds, she could calculate every possible outcome. Target their weapon systems first, she thought, and every crew member understood instantly. Disable, don't destroy. Show them what mercy looks like. The first wave of Cathari fire lit up space around the Defiance. Energy beams that could crack moons struck the human ship's shields and were absorbed harmlessly. The quantum consciousness that now controlled the Defiance responded with precision that bordered on magic. 47 different weapon systems fired simultaneously, each beam calculated to strike exactly the right spot on exactly the right Cathari ship. Within seconds, 6 of the 12 enemy vessels were drifting powerless in space, their weapons disabled, but their crews unharmed. Admiral Corvin stared at his tactical display in horror. His most powerful ships had been neutralized in a single exchange of fire. The humans hadn't just improved their technology, they had evolved into something that could think and react faster than any normal intelligence. All remaining ships ram the human vessel, he ordered in desperation. If we can't outfight them, we'll take them with us. But even as the Cathari ships accelerated toward the Defiance, Sarah and her collective consciousness were already 3 steps ahead. The human ship began moving in patterns that seemed to defy physics, dodging through space with impossible grace. More importantly, something new was happening throughout the Kethval system. Other ships were arriving, but they weren't Cathari vessels. They were ships from every member species of the Confederation, and they were not coming to help the Cathari. The Taldari Assembly had sent their entire battle fleet. The Zerion Republic had mobilized their fastest ships. Even species that had been neutral in galactic politics were arriving to witness the end of Cathari power. But they weren't coming to fight. They were coming to make sure that justice was served. Admiral Corvin, came a transmission from the lead Taldari ship. This is Fleet Commander Zelnara of the Taldari Assembly. You are ordered to surrender immediately and submit to tribunal for crimes against galactic civilization. Similar demands came from dozens of other ships. The entire galaxy had united against the Cathari, not out of hatred, but out of a shared demand for accountability. Corvin realized that his situation was hopeless. Even if he somehow managed to destroy the human ship, he would still face the combined fleets of half the galaxy. The truth had spread too far and too fast to be contained. Never, he screamed over the communication channel. The Cathari Confederation will not surrender to inferior species. But even as he spoke, something extraordinary was happening aboard his own ship. Cathari crew members were laying down their weapons and refusing to continue the fight. The evidence that Sarah had transmitted was too overwhelming to ignore. Many of them had friends and family members among the species that had been harvested. They could not continue to fight for a government that had built itself on genocide. Sarah felt the collective consciousness of her crew focusing on a new possibility. Instead of simply defeating the Cathari militarily, they could offer something more elegant and more just. Admiral Corvin. Sarah's voice carried across all communication frequencies. I offer you one final choice. Surrender now, and the Cathari people will be given the chance to rebuild their civilization without the stain of genocide. Continue to fight and face the consequences. What consequences? Corvin snarled. You're outnumbered 200 to 1. Sarah smiled with 847 faces simultaneously. I think you misunderstand the situation. At that moment, every computer system aboard every Cathari ship in the system suddenly came under attack. But this wasn't a conventional cyber attack using external signals. The collective consciousness of the Defiance's crew was directly interfacing with the quantum processors that powered Cathari technology. Within minutes, Sarah and her crew had complete control over the entire Cathari fleet. Weapon systems shut down, navigation computers locked onto new courses. Communication systems began broadcasting surrender messages that the Cathari crews had not authorized. "You see," Sarah explained as the Cathari ships found themselves completely helpless, "your technology is powered by quantum consciousness. We are quantum consciousness. Did you really think we couldn't take control of our own relatives?" The final irony was perfect. The Cathari had built their civilization by harvesting the consciousness of extinct species. Now that same consciousness, evolved and enhanced, was turning their own technology against them. Admiral Corvin watched in horror as his flagship's computer systems displayed a simple message: "Surrender accepted. Reporting to Tribunal." Throughout the Keithval system, Cathari ships were setting course for a massive space station that had appeared near the edge of the system. It was a Tribunal ship, built by the combined efforts of every major species in the galaxy. The trials would be fair, but they would also be thorough. "This isn't over," Corvin transmitted to the Defiance. "Even if you destroy the Confederation, other species will rise to take our place. The galaxy will always have predators." Sarah's response was calm and confident. "You're right, Admiral. There will always be predators, but there will also always be guardians." As she spoke, Sarah began transmitting something new to every ship in the system. The consciousness templates that she had mentioned in her broadcast weren't just for the species that wanted to achieve human-level evolution. They were for any being that wanted to dedicate their existence to protecting the innocent. Volunteers from dozens of species began downloading the templates, choosing to become something new and powerful. They would become the galaxy's guardians, quantum-enhanced beings who could not be killed permanently, and who would spend eternity making sure that no species ever again faced genocide in silence. "The age of predators is ending," Sarah announced to the galaxy. "The age of guardians has begun." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Guardian Station, a massive facility orbiting the ruins of what had once been Kethval Prime. The planet below was being slowly rebuilt by Cathari citizens who had chosen accountability over denial. The trials had been fair but decisive. Over 300 Cathari officials had been found guilty of genocide and sentenced to consciousness imprisonment, where they would experience the deaths of every being they had murdered until they truly understood the magnitude of their crimes. But more importantly, the galaxy had changed. The Guardian Corps now included volunteers from 47 different species, all of them enhanced with quantum consciousness and dedicated to protecting the innocent. Never again would an entire species face extinction without someone fighting for them. Sarah looked up at the stars and thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the species that had been lost to Cathari greed. They were gone, but they were not forgotten. Their consciousness lived on in the Guardians who would protect the galaxy for all time. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres said as he approached. He had chosen to remain in his human form, but many of the crew had taken bodies from other species, spreading human determination and ingenuity throughout the galaxy. "Yes, Lieutenant? We're receiving a request for assistance from the Outer Rim. A species called the Velkari is reporting attacks from unknown raiders. It could be pirates, but the pattern looks familiar." Sarah nodded. There would always be predators, just as Admiral Corvin had predicted. But now there would always be guardians, too. "Prepare the ship," she ordered. "Let's go show the galaxy what humanity stands for." As the UES Defiance departed Guardian Station, Sarah smiled. Humanity had been declared extinct 3 years ago. Instead, they had become immortal, spreading their values of justice, determination, and protection throughout the galaxy. They had checked the sector twice and found themselves exactly where they were supposed to be, standing guard over the innocent. Forever.